Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Edible Software. Today, we are going to be talking about some miscellaneous receivable screens. So, we already have had a training regarding the Payment Refund Center as well as the Apply Credits area. So, we talked about how to apply customer payments and how to apply credits. If you missed that, please feel free to let us know if you have not seen that video or if you haven't seen the link yet, and we will send that out to you. But if you have questions on that, please refer to that video. And if you have more questions, obviously send us an email. All right. So, what we're going to start off with today is the customer screen. So, I'm going to come to receivables and customers. And this is what we refer to as our customer master file. So, essentially, it has all of our customer information. So, we are in this screen seeing one customer at a time. The first tab that we come into is the corporate tab. So if this is not the corporate that I wanted to see, I can go ahead and select customer or select corporate, whichever one I want to do. And I can say Carnival Fruit Company, and that will bring me to that corporate. So I have my corporate ID at the top and my corporate name. And then here I have all of my corporate information. If I wanted to create a new customer in the system, for those of you who don't know, Edible does require a corporate entity and a customer entity. So even if this is a one location customer, they deal with themselves, they are mom and pop shop or anything like that. When you create one, you do have to create the corporate information, but then you can just copy that as the customer file as well. So as you can see, I tried to jump ahead, wouldn't let me. But anyway, that is essentially the basic rules on setting up customers. You do have to have a corporate entity, and then you can create any subsequent customers underneath that corporate. So I'm not going to create a new one here in this training. I'm just going to go through this. If you have any questions on how to create a new customer, let us know, and we'll walk through that with you. But essentially, in this corporate tab, I've got all of my basic corporate information. So this is what many people would refer to as the bill to information. So I've got my address, my city, my state, my country, URL if we want to keep track of that, primary email address for this corporate, our primary contact, their name and their title, phone number, cell, all that good stuff. And then, of course, if I have any comments on this corporate, I can go ahead and add those in. Those are completely internal. After I have the corporate set up, I can come into the customer tab and see all of the subsequent customer locations that I have for this corporate. So here, this is just a one-in-one situation, like I was just talking about that mom and pop. So I have one customer listed here, and here I have all of their information. Their address, city, state, and zip might be the same as the corporate, no worries. But they might have a different contact, might have a different email, whatever the case is. If I do have multiple customers under a corporate, when I select that different customer, it will show their information. So it's based on who I have selected up here uh, that this information is relative to what I have selected. So going through, this is basic shipping information. I can put in a ship via if I wanted to. This is for the sales orders. If you have questions on the ship via, please refer to the sales orders training that we had. But you can have a default ship via. Something we also have here is driving time. This does feed into the default requested delivery date for this customer's order. It will take your default order date and it will add this driving time so that we know exactly when this is supposed to show up for them. Over here on the right side, we also have this information. All this information, of course, is specific again to this customer. So we have credit limit, the credit limit grace amount. So if we allow up to $1,000 in credit, we can enter that in. If we want to give them a grace amount above that credit limit, we can also add that. This, of course, we have our terms. This I want to stop on really quickly because we have had plenty of questions in the past. Terms are based on when this invoice, or typically when this customer's invoice is due. So it has nothing to do with the type of payment or anything like that. It is purely based on that time frame. So COD and cash only is a way to specify terms, but they basically mean the same thing. They are um, due basically as soon as possible. Monthly statement. If we choose monthly statement, we can specify that information here, the closing day of the month. If the statement due date is day due, or sorry, if the statement due date is due on the same or the next day, so we can specify that information. And then, of course, from here it is uh, number of days. So if you have a general number of days that this customer's invoices are due in, you can specify that information. If you choose other, you can put in an individual specified date. So this, of course, this feeds into open receivable aging and everything like that. So it feeds into a lot of our agent or AR reports. The reason I wanted to talk about that as well is because some people have had questions about what about credit card customers or anything like that. There are different areas to specify this as a credit card customer, but it is not the terms. The terms are specifically about when the invoice is due. Grace period, of course, we can also put a grace period on top of the terms. So even if it's cash on demand or cash only or whatever the case may be, we can also put in maybe a 3-day grace period. So we can keep that in there as well. Here, the soft credit hold. So what we have in system settings, if you haven't been in system settings yet, or maybe you're not sure what you're currently running on, we have a pretty strict hold policy. So if the customer is put on hold, we cannot even save a sales order for them. However, we have instituted a soft credit hold option as well. This right here, this first option is basically saying ignore the soft credit hold. We're going to pay attention to the normal system hold option. So if they're on hold, they're on hold. No sales orders going out. Or we can apply a soft hold. So we can apply a soft hold flag when the credit limit is exceeded. So all this does is saying if we have passed our $1,000 or whatever it may be, if this customer has exceeded that, then the next sales order or the next sales orders that we have for them, we're going to allow them to put in these orders, but we cannot ship them out unless they uh, come back within that credit limit, or we manually take that order off of the soft credit hold, and that is in the shipping screen. There's a checkbox where you can say, all right, I'm going to let this order go by, even though they might be over their credit limit. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility as far as the on hold option. There's also applied soft credit hold regardless of credit limit. So this is just a little bit more strict, but you still have the flexibility if need be. All right, over here on the right side, these are just options as far as assigning certain people or certain warehouses or things like that to this customer. So the first one is account manager. This is a person set up under file and personnel. So if you have somebody set up under file and personnel, you can assign them as an account manager to this customer. Sales rep and seller ID, same exact thing. These are people that are set up under personnel and they are flagged as a sales rep or a seller ID. So you can assign them to this customer. So they will appear on the sales order anytime you create a sales order for this customer. Price level, this is going to be based on how your pricing is set up. So that's a different training. So I'm not going to get too far into that. But if you are linking price levels to specific customers. This is just the price level this customer belongs to. Tax schedule, same exact thing. If you are doing your taxing by customer, then you can choose a tax schedule. Warehouse. So the warehouse is basically a default warehouse. Whenever we create a sales order for this customer, we can specify we want to ship out of this particular warehouse. So for those of you who are working with multiple warehouses, that is an option. Otherwise, if you are not working with multiple warehouses, you don't have to worry about it. And if nothing is specified there, it is just going to be the default warehouse for the system, and that's set up under code maintenance. Freight zone, again, this is another conversation of underpricing and taxing. For those of you who need to apply freight charges based on the customer's distance to your warehouse, we can set up freight zones with specific freight uh, amounts. And this is basically just tagging this customer within a specific freight zone. Default order type. So some of you may use this, some of you may not use this. It's perfectly fine. It's another option that's set up under code maintenance. And this is just linking or just setting up this customer as a specific order type, whether they're a restaurant, wholesaler, maybe a deli restaurant, whatever the case. Price list, we will want to have this set up for all of your customers. So if this is showing blank, you will want to change this because if we do not have this selected, it will not print a price list for this customer. Even if you don't print price list, it is recommended we have something set up for this customer uh, because this could affect other things. For those of you maybe using the edible store module, we do have to have this set in order for items to show up in edible store. So anyway, I recommend price list set to all. You can always specify to only print standard items when printing the actual price list. So that is completely up to you, but I always recommend setting that to all. And then pricing groups. So right now, it does look like we do have our pricing set by groups. So this is based on whatever pricing group we have set up. We're going to be talking about customer groups as well, so don't worry about that right now. But this is basically just specifying what type of group this belongs into. This controls our pricing. Print outstanding invoices on customers. So we do have system settings for these. As you can see, anytime you have an option that says use default settings or obey system settings, it means there is a system setting or a general setting that you can specify, but you can change this per customer. So print outstanding invoices on customer invoice. It is exactly what it sounds like. If you are sending out a sales order and you print out that invoice, you can specify whether or not you want to print out outstanding invoice balances on that customer invoice as well. So it's kind of like sending out a mini statement every time we send out a sales order. Mark new item on order as standard. Essentially, what this is doing is building up your standard list. We're going to be coming into this Spec 1 tab pretty soon. Basically, that is keeping track of standard items for this customer. So really, all that is if you say yes, or if your default settings say yes, you are saying anytime I create or anytime I sell something new to a customer, that item is going to be automatically flagged or marked as standard. So it will pre-populate next time on the sales order, depending on your settings. That is actually this next setting. Pre-fill new sales order with standard items. What this is saying is if I have items in this Spec 1 tab marked as standard, then they are going to pre-fill on the sales order when I create a new sales order for this customer. This helps you to not have to add items every single time on a sales order. So if you're selling pretty regularly the same items to this customer, it just takes away some steps. You only have to put in the quantity that you need. So here, of course, we have use default settings. We have no if you don't want them. We can also specify to pre-fill based on the day of the week. So we can say regardless of the day of the week, so it doesn't matter what day they order on. And this says, yes, it matters. What is the requested delivery date on? And again, we're going to get into that. Essentially, we have this right here. We can mark items standard for specific days. So again, that's just what that setting is referring to. And then we have customer requirements. So if you wanted to specify customer requirements in order to save an order, we can specify that the customer must meet one or all of these requirements, and we can put in a minimum order quantity, a minimum order weight, or a minimum order dollar amount. So that is up to you how you would want to work with that. Now, of course, down here we have a couple of check options. So, is a PO required? Do we want to print suggested retail price on the invoice? So a lot of these are pretty straightforward. Um, Ignore password authorization for credit limits, terms, routing, and purchase history. So um, if you are using the system setting option as far as entering in an advisor, or I should say an admin password for if they are over their credit limit or anything like that, we can choose per customer whether we want to ignore that. Do not print prices on invoice. So that's an option that you have for your customers. Auto print pick ticket or auto print invoice. So that is in an unattended batch process that we would need to set up. Offer push items. So if you do use our push items list, we can specify whether we need to offer push items to this customer. So if you are using our push items list and this is not selected, then you will not be able to use your push items for this customer. Allow substitute items, same thing. If you have substitutes set up for your item codes, but you do not have this checked, you will not be able to substitute for that customer. Print customer's item code on invoice. So this is a nice feature. We can enter in a customer's item code on the spec tab, and I'll show you that when we get there. But if you have a customer's item code set up for a particular item, it will print their item code on the invoice, making it a little bit easier for them to understand exactly what they bought. Bypass the minimum selling price. So minimum selling price is something that's entered into the item cost screen, which we haven't done a video on yet, but it will be coming. So if that is a setting, again, this is a system setting. So if you wanted to bypass this password, then no worries. Then allow back orders. If we wanted to allow back orders for this customer, we can press that. And then, of course, here's the on hold option. So the on hold option is I don't care. And this actually does overwrite the soft credit hold. Um, if I am on hold, it means I can't sell anything to this customer. Nothing can happen with them. I can't save a sales order. All right. Up here before well, really quickly, additional email settings. So we have our email accounts here, and we have system settings to say whether we want to send out um, statements or invoices to the corporate or the customer email address. But we can go further if we needed to. If we wanted to bypass that and say, I want certain documents to go to certain people, for that customer, you can open up the additional email settings and you can go ahead and select your document. So let's say invoices and credit memos, and we can enter in that invoice right here. Oops, excuse me. So we can enter that invoice right here. We can put in a salutation. We can even change the from name and from address if we wanted to. And right here, we can put in an additional message. So any emails regarding these documents, the documents will be sent out as an attachment. And here we can put in an additional message for the actual email itself, the body of the email itself. So statement, invoices, customer order form, price list, all of those things we can specify to have to go to a certain person. All right. Up here at the top, we do have routes. So for those of you who are utilizing our route system, you can use routes that are set up in, excuse me, you can use routes that are set up underneath code maintenance, or if you didn't want to, we do have a setting that allows you to just manually write in a new route if you wanted to. And then this would be the sequence. So of course this would be the route and this would be the stop on that route. So you can specify routes for specific days of the week if you ship to this customer pretty regularly on a pretty set schedule. You can go ahead and pop those in. We have different settings using routes to restrict days only for routes, so on and so forth. We are pretty flexible on routes, though. If for some reason we shipped out on a Tuesday and they had a set route for that, but it needed to be shipped a different way, we do have the ability to change that in the shipping screen. Again, that would be in the sales and shipping training that we've done already. All right. And again, if you needed to add a new customer to this corporate, maybe they added a different location that's going to be buying from you, you can just come down here at the bottom and click Add Customer. enter in the new name. You can even enter in a different ID if you wanted to before saving, and then you would just enter in all of their information. Again, all of this is per the customer selected up here. All right. Customer 2 tab. This is actually going to be certain information for this customer. A lot of it isn't typically used, but just so you just so you know, again, it is per customer. So if you had multiple customer locations, make sure you're selecting which one you're working with. And you can say use alternative company name when printing out certain documents. The alternate company name is the separate company you might have under options and system settings. So if you do not have an alternate company name, do not worry at all about that. Customer status is just a status we can set up under code maintenance. So it doesn't really feed into anything. It is purely internal. Shipping method, this is just the default shipping method for the customer. So if you typically pick, or if they pick up from you, and your default for the system is set to delivery, you can specify that per customer. You can put in target weekly sales, that will feed into certain reports. Bill backs and rebates, that's going to be its own training, so I'm going to skip that for now. But you can put in a general bill back or amount or percentage and a reason code. Print line items with zero delivered quantities on invoice and pick ticket. So if for some reason you set up a sales order, you were going to sell 10 cases of this item to the customer, but you couldn't find any, so you decide to change the delivery quantity to zero, you can specify whether or not you want to print that out on the invoice. Again, there are system settings already here for you, so you can just set that per customer if you wanted to. Then the same thing, print bill to address on the invoice. So the bill to address, of course, is the corporate, and then the customer would be the ship to address. Let me come back in here. And this down here, we have comments on the customer. So if you, we have comments on the customer that can show up on the sales order screen. Again, it's internal. The customer won't actually see it, but that is good for the seller if there needs to be certain comments there. And then the created information pre-fills based on when this customer was actually created. So since we don't have a by user, we know that this was actually imported into the system. Some other things we can do in here is set a preferred delivery time. So we can say from a certain time and to a certain time, this is the window that they prefer to receive in. So we can set that up for them. We can also enter in some standard notes. So a permanent invoice note, this will be per customer. So you can set up a permanent invoice note that will always print out on their invoices. Permanent picker note, so same idea, just for the pick ticket. And then a customer sales order note. So this is just a separate note, or sorry, this is a separate note that will actually show up on the sales order screen. All right. So moving on, and then the DUNS number and communication ID, this is primarily for importing purposes. So for those of you who do not import, you do not have to worry about this. All right. The accounting tab. So here we've got a little bit more information that's kind of nice. In here we can see our AR balances, and we can see our credit terms, we can see discounts, and we can actually update this information as well. So if we wanted to put in payment discount days and discount percentage, if we have that for this customer, we can go ahead and put that there. Um, if for any reason you are running your general ledger based on warehouse, you can go ahead and specify a customer to a specific sales account or COGS account. And then this is just last payment information. The rest of this is essentially just for review purposes. So for those of you who want to review what is happening with the customer as far as their balances, I'm actually going to choose a customer I know actually has something in there right now. So this is showing me on my AR balances my current amount, or the current amount that is owed to me from this customer. If they have anything that is older, a little bit more out of overdue, then it will show up in any of these buckets depending on the due date of the invoice. So if it's past 30 days, here we go. If it's past 60 days, so on and so forth. And as you can see, when I'm out of edit mode, uh, anytime I hover, I can actually see, I can actually drill down if I wanted to see what's making up that number. So if I double click, I can drill down and see that invoice, and I can drill down even further on the invoice and see the actual invoice information. Now, if I wanted to see a little bit more, this is just these are just balances that are currently sitting on their or outstanding balances that are currently on their ledger. If I wanted to look at their ledger, maybe for historical purposes, maybe for things that aren't just outstanding, I can come into my ledger or click that ledger button down at the bottom. And again, you will need to make sure you're choosing the correct customer. And I can go ahead and double click on any of these and see the same information. I can come in, see the details of the invoice, see my payments. So here I can see it was applied through to a credit memo, or a credit memo was applied to it. And I can see receipts, I can see credits, I can see discounts. So basically anything as far as this customer's account, I can see that historical information. I can see the original amounts, and I can also see the current balances. Now, this is all based on these dates. As you can see, I'm not actually seeing my most recent balance, that $50, but that is because it is a later date. So if I bump this up to today's date and refresh, here I can see that balance. So a very nice screen to take a look at a customer's account and see what's going on there. We also have the same thing for unbilled invoices. So what hits the ledger are billed orders. They have to be billed or credit memos. But if any sales order exists for this customer that is marked as delivered or open, it will show up in the unbilled invoices. So right now we don't have anything there. But if you need to look at any open or delivered orders in here, that is what you can click right there. We can also go to our credit history for this customer, and this will open up the credit history screen. So we can see all this information, what they still owe, if there's anything past due. So since this is COD, it automatically goes past due. But basically, we can see all their information. And then from here, we can actually print a statement if we wanted to. So we can jump directly to the print statement screen, which we're going to get to when we cover AR reports. So we will skip that for today. All right, the Spec 1 tab, we talked about those standard items. So again, we can mark items as standard. We can have them pre-fill on the sales order, whether by default or based on the day of the week. So depending on how you want to do that. Or maybe I just want to keep track of items on this list, but I don't necessarily want to mark them as standard. So I can go ahead and just remove the standard flag. All that does is it removes it as standard. Um, so you will notice there are quite a few reports and screens that run by standard items. If something exists in this list but is not flagged as standard, they will not be included. So just bear that in mind. But it allows you to keep track of those items without having them pre-populate or anything like that. So that's completely up to you. And then, of course, we do have some check all and uncheck all options. So here, setting them as standard items, we can check all or uncheck all, setting as a price list item, allowing substitutes, marking days of the week. So we do have these check all and uncheck all options. Another thing down in this screen to keep track of is the last purchase information. So the last time the customer purchased this item, it's going to show that information in here. So it does update based on the last time this customer bought this item, what they bought, in what unit, what date, and what was the unit price that they paid for. Excuse me. Here we can also print a line note for an item in here. So with the item selected, I can put in a line note, and that's going to be a permanent line note on this customer's invoice. We also talked about customer item codes. So if this celery diced, I know this is 11381, that's my code. But if they know this as CELD18, then we can go ahead and print that out on on the invoice. Again, if you have that option selected under the Customer One tab. So that's an option that we have as well to set up the customer item codes. We can even specify a different order description. So anytime they order from me, this will be in their description as well. So item code description, whichever way you want to help them out, this gives you the ability to. Right. What we can also do in this screen is add items. So we can add items manually from this screen if we wanted to, or remove items completely from this screen if we wanted to. So if you had that option to mark new items as standard, it's going to pre-fill this automatically when you're working in the sales order. However, if you wanted to add an item already, we can just go ahead and choose what we need. We can put in that order description, that customer item code. However, you do see that there's no last purchase information. So bear in mind, if you do find something in this screen and it doesn't have that information, we know it was just added manually. All right. The Spec 2 tab, this is all about what we are allowing this customer to buy from us. So we have a restrict option. So we can restrict customers, we can restrict items to sell to these customers based on a grid or in a group. So if we say, okay, I don't want to be able to sell this item here, I can add items individually or remove them, or I can specify a group. So again, we're going to talk about the customer groups in just a bit. Um, but I can, well, this would be item groups, uh, which we have talked about in a different training. So please refer to that if you have any questions. But you can set up an item group and say, I don't want to sell this group of items to this customer. So that is essentially what this allows you to do, is restrict certain items to being sold to this customer. On the opposite end, we have trade items. So we have the ability to say, I only want this customer to buy certain items from me. So I can say customer standard items. So we can just say, I only want them to buy their standard items. I only want them, I only want them to buy the items that I have listed in this grid below, or these items in this group. So again, it is essentially doing the same thing just in a different way. Either we're restricting items or we're allowing items. So back to groups. So these are customer groups. This screen is really just showing you all of the groups that this customer belongs to. So right now we can see it does belong to a pricing group. However, we can even add new groups to this customer if we wanted to. So if we wanted to add to a certain group, we can click that add to new group option, and it shows us all of the customer groups we have set up right now. So right now we only have pricing groups set up, but you can go ahead and look for a group and add them there. Now I won't be able to do it for pricing because they already belong to a pricing group. There are certain rules which we're actually going to go to in just a second. So when I'm not in edit mode, I do have this manage groups button down at the bottom. This allows me to jump straight into the customer group screen, which is also under the receivables menu right down here. So it's the same exact screen, but what it allows us to do is create groups for our customers. So we have different group options here. So that's going to be the first thing you do in this screen is select the group type. The main difference between these is general is a many-to-many relationship. I can set up general groups for anything that I want to. I can set up groups that sell produce. I can set up groups that are in a specific area of the country. I can set up groups for people who annoy me. Whatever I want to do, I can set up a group and I can have a single customer in multiple general groups if I wanted to. They may fit into this locale. They may sell produce. They may annoy me, whatever the case is. The other options are pricing, discounts, taxing, locale. All of these are many to one relationships. So if I have a pricing group, like I said before, I can't add this customer to a different pricing group because they already belong to one. That is because this pricing group is helping me calculate my prices for my item prices for this customer. So I can't have them fitting into multiple price groups because then Edible wouldn't know what to calculate. So it's the same thing with taxing and discounts and commission. So again, or I apologize. Commission groups do allow you to set up, or you are allowed to set up different commission groups for your sellers. So this customer may fall into different commission groups. So I do apologize. I misspoke on that end. So you can fit a customer into multiple commission groups. All right. But to create a group, I'm going to stick with a general group just as an example. I'm going to click new, and I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to say MFP, meat, fish, and poultry. So maybe I want to, if I can spell correctly, maybe I want to keep track of all of my meat, fish, and poultry together. So I'm going to go ahead and create a group for that. So I give it a group. Chose my group type. I click new. I choose my group name, put in a description, and then I'm going to add all of the customers that fit into this area. Chapel sausage, seafood. We got a lot of these here. Little pop seafood. I think that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. And yet again, I can create another group that might coincide with this same customer. So this customer can fit into that other general group as well. But a group can be changed at any time. So there's certain information for the customer that can't be changed. Not a lot. The customer is pretty flexible. You can change the address or anything like that. However, there are certain things that can't be changed. The groups, however, are completely flexible. You can create a group, you can add a customer to a group, and you can remove that customer from that group whenever you need to. So there's no historical restrictions or anything like that. I can come in and delete the group entirely. I can edit and remove an item or remove a customer from one group and add them to another group, whatever I wanted to do. And that goes for any of these group types. So completely flexible. You can do whatever you need to in this screen. All right. So as I have added that customer to that group, it now has updated this screen to show that. All right. Notes. This is specific to the reminders in the system. So here we have under File and Reminders a way to send reminders or send notes out to people within the system. And these notes can be related to a specific customer. I'm not going to go into great detail. We are going to have a different training on these reminders. But just to show you, if I click New, I can create a reminder in here. I can choose my note topic, which I don't have one right now. That's set up in code maintenance. But I can choose who I need this note to go to, and it's already linked to this corporate. And I can just go ahead and start typing in whatever note I need to. Special order on Thursday. Make sure that this fish is cut down for this customer by next Tuesday. Whatever the case may be, I can write in that note. I can put in the remind at. So I'm going to say, make sure you remind by tomorrow at 10 o'clock because I know that this person comes in at 10. So as soon as they log into the system, there will be a reminder showing up at the top left, and they can mark it as done or they can postpone it until it's actually done. All right. Recurrent add-on POs. So this is very similar to the vendors that we have gone over already. This is going to show you any recurrent add-ons that you might have for this customer. So when I sell to this customer, let's say I always have to pay a freight company in order to get it out there. So I always have to pay the same freight company in order to get the inventory over to them. So in this screen, I can click Add Item, choose my type, so freight out, choose my vendor. So these guys help These guys help to send inventory for me. Here I can choose how I'm allocating that cost by. Again, we have had trainings on add-on POs for sales, so if you've missed that, please refer back to that training. And then in here I can put in my total cost. So I typically pay them $150. That can be changed at the time of actually creating the add-on, so don't worry about that. This is just a general idea. So when I click save, the next time I create a sales order for this customer, it's going to flash in the bottom right of the sales order screen indicating I have a recurrent add-on that I need to create. And of course I can waive that or I can create it from there. This just makes it easier for you. You don't have to create an add-on from memory or anything like that. All right, the last screen is the departments. So the departments allows you to keep track of different people within different departments of this customer or for this customer. So it is purely for contact information. Again, we can choose which customer we're actually working with, and we can add different departments. Maybe I talk to Judy in AR. Maybe I talk to Mike down in the shipping dock, so on and so forth. I can add that department, add their contact information, get their phone number, and everything like that. So that's basically all this screen is for, is just keeping track of different people within a customer, different contacts. All right. So that is basically the customer master file. As I said before, there are certain things that you can't remove or change after after the customer has been used or after we have sold to them. You can inactivate them. So let's say I've already sold to New Sea Escape. I know this. I cannot delete this customer. If I tried to remove customer, it will tell me I cannot. So the only thing that I can do is inactivate them. Now, if I have to do that for the entire corporate, I can do that for the entire corporate as well. I can just inactivate them at the top and it will inactivate the customer as well. So that is if I do not sell to this customer anymore. Um, if there is a situation, excuse me, if there's a situation where I've created a customer but I haven't sold to them yet, then you do have the ability to remove them from this list. But if you have, you cannot change them. You can update the names of the corporate and the customer, so you can update that information at any time. However, you cannot update the IDs. Those are what, uh, or sorry, those fields are tied to the orders that we have in the system. So again, there are certain things you can change, but once you have transactional history against this customer, there are a few things that you cannot delete or update. All right. So coming back in, uh, pretty much in the same vein as the customer master file, we have changed customers information. So this is going to be much quicker. We are seeing all of our customers at once, and we're seeing certain information in that customer master file. So all of this we have seen in the customer master file already. It's the same exact fields. This just gives us the ability to update multiple customers at a time. So it allows us to click edit, choose a customer, we can update their routes, their preferred delivery information. We can set up their contact or any of those fields. We have a few of those settings that we saw. So it just allows us to update that customer. And instead of having to save and select another customer, I can just move down to the next one, update their information. Once I'm done with everything, I just click save and that's it. So this is just a different way to update that customer information without having to do it one by one. All right, go ahead and close that. The customer sales projection, I'm actually going to skip today because we don't have enough information for this. So I'm going to skip this. If you have any questions, please email us and we'll get you that information for that if you are interested in it. The transfer standard items, this is a great tool for customers who are very similar to each other or individual customers under a corporate. So, as we discussed before, the standard items are customer specific, but maybe I have a Kroger or a Walmart customer, um, or a list of Walmart customers, and they all buy the same things from me. So I want to go ahead. I don't want to have to add all of those items or build up that standard list over the course of a few months. That would be ridiculous. So here, what I can do is select my customer. I can set up one of them. So I will have to set up one of them, either manually or through the sales orders. But I can choose them. So this is showing me my standard list. And what I can do from here is click edit and add customers. So I know that my waterfront market and my Jerry Seafood Company need to have this same standard list. And if I already have standard lists for these customers, I might want to pay attention to some of these options up at the top before I save. One thing I can do is include inactive items also. So if any of these items in this standard list are inactive, I can choose to include them. Otherwise, they will not be brought over. Remove existing items. So if I do have a standard list for Jerry Seafood, I can go ahead and remove those items first and then bring this. So it's a complete override. Or I can say also override the existing information if the items exist. So if these items already exist on this or on this for this customer, it will overwrite some of that information. So if they had a customer item code, if they had an order description, uh, if it's standard for certain days, whatever the case may be, it would override all of that information as well. So those are a couple of options for you. Yep. Oh, and you can choose whether you only want to include standard items or all items. So here, if I only included standard items, the beef patty and the Eddie smoked drumsticks would not be brought over. But if I said all, it will include all of my items. So here, I'm going to go ahead and do all. I'm going to go ahead and save. So now, if I go to Waterfront Market, it will look exactly like that list. And here we go. So that is a easy way to set up different customers' standard item list if they are very similar. We also have a maintain standard items. So as you can see, if you've sold plenty of items to that customer and it's basically building up your standard list, you may have a lot of items that you maybe sold to them once or twice, but you don't intend to sell again. So what you can do in here, if that's the situation, you can choose the individual customers and update that spec list as needed. Or for certain customers, you can go ahead and select the customer if you want to, or you can do this for all customers. Or up here, you can select different customers or customer groups. So based on what you have selected up here, you can go ahead and either reset the flag or delete items from the standard list that haven't been purchased within a certain number of or from a certain date. So resetting the flag keeps the item in the standard list. It just unflags it as standard, or I can just delete them. I don't want to see them in the list anymore. So again, you can do one or the other, and it's just going to delete any items that haven't been purchased since that date. All right. Prospect customers. So here, if you have a prospect customer, you can go ahead and add them to this screen. So we can go ahead and add their name, their address, all of their shipping information. We can put in their main contact and other contacts. We can go ahead and put in whether a new business, if they're currently open, if they're not open yet, when are they projected to open, and then we can put in some information. How long have they been in business? How many times per week do they receive product? Excuse me. All of that great information. So we can go ahead, and this is just a prospect listing report, which we're going to get to as well in the AR reports, but that's just a quick click to that. But here, it just allows you to see all of this information for this prospect customer. So once you save them, they'll be saved in this prospect list. So once you're done, you can actually import them to the master file once they are a full customer. So here, uh, we're running a little low on time, so I'm not going to set up this customer or this prospect yet. But when you save, it's just going to save all this information. The main page will list all of your prospects, and then you can choose individual customers to import as needed. And then, of course, if they're no longer, so this is basically what you would see when you first come in or after you've saved. You'll see all of your prospects listed here with their contact and shipping information. And you can import then to master file if you needed to. Or, of course, if this prospect lead didn't really go anywhere, we can delete them as well. All right. So that was the prospect customers. Bill orders we've already talked about in the sales and shipping training. Same thing again. We talked about the payment refund center. One thing we didn't talk about in the payment refund center or applying payments is a different way to apply payments, which is cash receipt by route. So this is a very simple way to create pay or enter in payments. So for those of you who are routing, it's a nice feature. What I can do in here is I can go ahead and set my filter information. So I want to only pull up orders with a requested delivery date on this date. I can choose the apply date of the batch that I might be creating, or if I'm merging into a batch, I can choose the apply date to merge into. I can choose my I can choose my route that I want to pick up, and this is going to show me all of my invoices with that route and that requested delivery date. So here it's pulling in the invoice, the information, the invoice amount. It automatically pulls in the paid amount, so you can go ahead and overwrite that if need be. So if you're only partially paying, if you're putting in a discount, you can put in a discount if you wanted to. So here it's going to give us our total. We can put in a control sum of the batch if we wanted to. You can filter even further by saying I only want to see COD invoices, or I only want to see or show all outstanding invoices. From here, then, you have two options. You can either enter in a batch number and enter in a batch description and generate that batch. So basically, you have made those payments and generated the batch all at once. Or if a batch already exists for this day, you can go ahead and merge into it. Now, right now, I don't have a batch that is created, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in a batch number. I'm going to enter in a batch description. So, uh, cash for 1108. And I'm going to go ahead and generate this batch. So it's telling me this procedure will post one payment and create that batch. Yes. And I'll go ahead, and this is just giving me my log. So I'm going to go ahead and click close. So now if I go back into Payment Refund Center, I can see that cash batch. So that's just another way of processing payments. If you of processing payments if you need to. It's very quick and very easy, but it only works with routes. So if you are not routing, uh, sorry. All right. So what we're also going to talk about is customer groups. We've already talked about customer segmentation is pretty client specific, so we're not going to be going through that. We have already talked about the templates when we talked initially about Payment Refund Center. Essentially, this is just uh, activating certain payment instruments for us, so we don't have to worry about that. Um, so, really, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the transfer balance. So, the transfer balance feature allows you to transfer uh, credit balances between customers or between corporates. This really only works if you are working with corporates that may work together to pay off each other's balances. So, if you needed to do that, this is exactly where you would go. Now, I don't have any credits right now in the system, so I won't be able to run through this exactly, but you would select your first corporate. So let's say Caleb Haley and Capella Farms work tightly with each other and they're going to share balances. So if I had a credit balance for Caleb Haley, I would show all of my credits for Caleb Haley, and then I would show all of my invoices for Capella Farms. So what I would do, this works exactly like the apply credit screen that we ran through in our last training. You select the credit that you want or the open receipt balance that you want, click apply, and then apply that amount to whichever invoice or invoices you need for Capella Farms, and then go ahead and click save. So again, this is really only if you are in a situation where clients or customers are sharing those credit balances, but that is basically it. All right. That is pretty much it as far as what we wanted to cover through this training. So the next time that we talk, we are going to be going over AR reports. So thank you all again for joining me today. I hope you learned something. Again, if you have any questions whatsoever, email us or just contact us, and we will be happy to go through any questions that you might have one on one. I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great weekend, and I will see you next week to go over AR reports. Thank you again, and have a great day.